Um, so welcome. This is the J.A.M.E.S panel, and I'm Phil Bodger, and I am one of the J.A.M.E.S representatives. J.A.M.E.S accredits Anglia Ruskin University for their production courses, and we're putting on this panel today. I've got my guest Tony. Sorry, again, Matt Houghton and Tony Orchudesch. Matt, excuse me. So Matt works at Sound on Sound, does music technology in studio and looks at studio tools, production workflows. And Tony is in copyright and publishing and sync licensing and rights clearance. Is that correct? Would you like to say a little bit more about yourselves before we move on? Kick off.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Phil. I've been running my consultancy. We're music supervisors, so we look at music for film and TV. We clear music rights. We deal with copyright searches and basically researching music that's been used on any type of media. And then alongside that, we also do music production. I've got composers, freelance composers who do bespoke music, cover versions. So we try to cover quite a bit of the sync licensing business. So thank you, Phil. That's it.
And as you say, I'm Matt. I work for Sound on Sound magazine. My official title is reviews editor. But I work with evaluating music production equipment, software, hardware, and so on, and also writing tutorials about music production and interviewing, various people in the industry and picking their brains about everything that's going on. Some of whom I can see in the audience at the moment. I've seen the sort of technological shift in the tools used for music production over the last 20 years. I did an MA in audio production back in the day as well, so I might have a little idea of the education side of it, although I'm sure things have moved on a little bit since then.
And I should say that I'm an engineer producer. I started in London in the early 80s, worked for all the record labels, and did film music, music mixing, 5.1 mixing. I've done live film set playback as well, which is a completely different thing to being in the studio. But we're here to talk about AI. And obviously, everyone's talking about AI these days. Can I start by asking you what you understand by AI? AI in music, I should say.
Yeah, sure. So you might have different ideas. The terminology is really vague at the moment. So half of my job is nailing down words and meanings. And every time I look at the AI debate, it's, people use it to mean different things. So in my sector, there's a lot of tools that are using machine learning and neural networks to try and spot patterns and streamline workflows and so on. There's a whole wider societal debate about what they call general AI and the ability of computers running on silicon or whatever else to attain human-like intelligence. And there's a big debate about that. So I think from my point of view, I would talk about the music. I would draw a distinction between generative AI and the tools that we're using to create music automatically, and the sort of Suno and things like that in this world, and the use of machine learning for assistive tools to help people who are creating and have a creative intent and want to be able to speed up the process and get where they're going that bit quicker.
What sort of tools do you think are genuinely useful to producers and musicians?
That's a really tough question. I mean, so I do a lot of dialogue editing. So it's not music, but it's audio,
Yes.
Yeah, and in recent years, we all knew about the tools that Cedar has, or Isotope with RX and all of the noise removal and so on. What we're seeing now is a huge number of tools that are trained on very specific reference material to, strip out noises from dialogue recordings, for example, or to synthesize frequencies in dialogue that weren't there because it was for want of a better phrase, a crappy recording on a remote podcast service online, and or over a phone or something like that, or there was a dropout. So you can synthesize the words of a specific speaker to fill in where they've had fluffed lines. Those kind of tools are corrective, they're enabling you to work with material that previously would have rendered a project dead. They're enabling you to do other things much more quickly, like taking noise out of dialogue recordings for videos and so on, or to remove reverb, where once you might have tried to use a transient designer or something like that just to tighten the sound up, you can now strip the reverb away and have separate control over it, or the Sonox gating plugin now, where it can identify the different drums within a mix, or the stem separation if you're into remixing and that kind of stuff. There's loads of these tools, and it's in the short term, I think that's what's helping people. It's speeding up that process of identifying problems that would just take not particularly skill, just hours and hours of labour. So
you define that as assistive AI?
I would call it assistive AI. It's kind of removing obstacles to getting towards your goal while you're still using traditional methods of production.
As opposed to generative AI.
So generative AI, yeah, I would say you have things like, everyone's heard of Suno, where you can use large language model prompts and spit out a convincing facsimile of a tune in a specific style. But there's more than that. You can go in and embellish arrangements. You can have your rock pop bands, and you can say, I want to have a string arrangement. Can you create that for me? You can change someone's voice, which is really controversial at the moment because of the rights issues. But, if you're a songwriter and you want to pitch a song to a specific kind of artist, maybe I could sing in a really high falsetto voice, and I can change that to a female voice that's more like the artist I have in mind. I can then go and pitch that song. So that stuff is generative. It's creating new material. And then I think the assistive corrective stuff is helping us make the most of traditional recordings.
And I suppose with the assistive, you could argue that that's where we are now. Is just a progression that maybe started, I would say, maybe in the mid-'80s with drum machines, followed by samplers. And would you say that's true?
I think so, yeah. And other things like, things that are done algorithmically or with mechanical processes like Dolby noise reduction. It's the same tasks that we're approaching. It's just a different technology.
Yeah.
So I don't have any ethical qualms about doing that. There's huge ethical questions about the use of generative AI and AI generally.
Well, you mentioned rights. Maybe Tony can tell us a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the whole question from my perspective is obviously about music creation and music rights and how derivative it all is. I think there's a two-tier level here, really. I think for established acts and for people who have a clear place in the music industry that are experienced, it's less of a threat because they have their catalogue, they've got their publishers behind them, they maybe have a big record label that has their back on their own catalogue. I think for the younger songwriters, it's much more of a problem because they're emerging into the market. They don't have the same protections that existing writers, that more experienced writers have. So the derivative aspect of AI for them is much more of a threat. Having said that, there is, legislation, although it takes time to catch up, it is beginning to understand the situation in America. Particularly, we have a situation where courts, I think the US Copyright Office, have already ruled that purely derivative AI material has no copyright value and will receive no protection. Whereas if there is original content in there, that part of it will receive some sort of protection in law. Over here, we've been through a little bit of this before with sampling. When people started sampling in the 90s, there was no. Absolutely, it always takes a while for the legislation to catch up. It's always a bit slow. We've seen that with the internet, with Napster, and with the whole file sharing situation too. But in this case, I think the British legislative procedures will take time to cotton on to what is derivative and what is original, and to try and work out. Having said all of that, there have been some studies, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, that it is still quite a small percentage of material that's out there in the market that is AI driven. There have been some surveys done by some of the bigger companies in the business, and I think Universal did a survey that found that something like less than 0.0001% of their sample of something like 500,000 songs was AI driven. And even among those, a third of those...
Sorry, when you say AI driven...
Was created by AI.
Okay, completely
created by AI. And even out of those, that percentage, that tiny percentage, a third of those were for playlists or for remixes of existing material or for curation of someone's own personal playlist. So I didn't want to sort of frighten the market in terms of what it can do. But the rights situation is a very dangerous one. It's something that I think the British courts really have to get their skates on and catch up on at the moment.
Can I?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So this isn't my area of expertise, but I find it fascinating. So there's a couple of things I'd say about that. One is that AI is a global thing. The production of this stuff is happening everywhere. And at the moment, I don't think that the legal frameworks in the UK or the USA or any other specific territory are able to keep up with that. Music can be produced and uploaded anywhere. People find ways around and they can stream it. So there's definitely a risk there. I think I read something, I can't remember the figures off the top of my head, but Deezer had identified a huge number of AI tracks. I think there were 13.4 million as of January. And a massive percentage of those were deemed to be what they called fraudulent, which I'd take to mean highly derivative from other people's work. But I don't think the solution for that is necessarily a legal one. As I say, Deezer are taking action. Bandcamp have taken action. It's the platforms that decide what content is going to be allowed. It's the platforms that can change their terms and conditions at the drop of a hat, the same way that YouTube has just recently changed how it pays content creators or not. So anyone who's trying to make a living from putting that stuff up there is taking a risk.
Platforms and the music industry have been at war for a while. I mean, it's no secret that the royalties that come from Spotify or Amazon or any of those platforms are no way fair compensation for music creators. We've known that for a long time. So really, this is just it's another battle that is going to ensue between.
They do seem to be taking action because I presume that they see consumer demand for, or support for artists and creativity and human created content. So, that Lander that we use for one of our services, they recently had a term and condition change where they said that they're not going to distribute AI content or recognise any copyright on it. Bandcamp have said that they're not going to host it. So it's a market forces question, not a morality and an ethical question or a legal question. But if the demand is out there for the creative community to be protected and for people not to be hoodwinked into listening to fake music, then the people who control the gates via these platforms are going to take action in some way or another. Some of them aren't.
What makes the content valuable? If it's easier to generate, how do you value it?
How do you value the AI? I mean, I guess it's a question of how derivative it is. I mean, if a rights owner spots AI material that they feel is infringing on their rights, they will take action, but that will probably only crop up in a fraction of the cases where AI has been distributed. So it's going to be a question of logistics and a budget of how much the rights owners are able to take that action. It's all very well if it's established, a big company that's taking action like Universal or Sony, but the smaller writers aren't going to be able to have that muscle.
Yeah, and you're also going to hit this issue where, for decades, it's not an AI thing that people have been commissioned to write, very, very similar tracks that just get you the right side of the law. And AI can do that just as well. So the legal battles will take years and years and years, and generative AI is here now without the protections. So it's almost a red herring argument, I think, that you're going to need to think as, younger creators and musicians, what it is you want from your music. How do you make a connection with your audience while all of these questions are getting wrangled?
Well, maybe this is something where, there'll be more live music, there'll be more more work in terms of engaging with the audience, which AI.
Yes, just about to ask you, do you think, or how do audiences, or do audiences care about how their music is made?
I'm not sure they care how it's made necessarily. I mean, I saw, you might have seen these Iranian Lego videos, the propaganda war over the Hormuz Straits and so on. And they're hugely entertaining if you're of a certain political bent. It doesn't stop it being entertaining. The question I think that a lot of people are asking is it going to replace the other things that we find entertaining? Yeah. And, we've had competition for music from games and videos and film and whatever for years. It's another thing that's competing for attention. The quantity question is the real issue. How many millions of these tracks are going to be generated over the next year? How are people going to find that real music, if you like, the authentic stuff? What are they actually looking for? You can use AI for other things, for political means or whatever, to shape people's feelings, provoke an emotional reaction. You can do it with music. But what it can't do is create a human connection, in the same way that, like you say, performing, you go to a small intimate venue with your acoustic guitar and sit there and play, and you can eyeball the people in the audience. You're creating an experience. It's not the kind of thing that can be replicated. You go to a club, you get people dancing, maybe they'll dance to an AI track, but it's not the same as having someone up there in front of you leading the crowd and feeding back on the emotion that they sense. It's a tricky debate, but it's going to change, I think, how creators of music connect with their audience, for sure.
What can if the law and business are catching up, what can students do right now to become to deal with this and to looking forward? What should they do? What should their approach be?
That is a very tough question.
Yeah.
Tough question to answer. I think if you're discerning about the music that you like, then maybe you will steer clear of those kind of tracks if you can spot them. I don't know whether you can. The vocals now on some of these AI tracks are just incredible. One of my composers had asked AI to copy his vocals on one of his tracks, and even he found it difficult to tell the difference. So that's how sophisticated some of it is. Asking the consumer to discriminate is quite hard if a creator can't even tell themselves what the difference is. So
I want to be a bit more positive now, because this is all sounding rather negative. But Matt and I were talking earlier about the creativity and how AI can actually be it can help your creativity. It can be inspirational. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can drop a quick comment in, because we do some bespoke work ourselves, and in terms of the donkey work, it's great. You've already alluded to that. In terms of mixing and mastering a track, you've written the piece, but you're in the studio and you want to get it, match fit, ready for the client. So doing all the donkey work of sitting there with the knobs and dials.
You think mixing is donkey work?
Well,
I'm offended.
I'm not saying no. You know what I mean? It's sort of like it's the hard work after the initial creative.
The technical stuff.
Yeah, technique, exactly. After the creative.
What about in the writing, in the composing, in terms of demoing? I've spoke to someone the other day, and they were talking about having a sort of basic guitar and voice demo, and then wanting to give that to the other musicians involved in the project, and then fleshing it out with AI-generated strings.
Yeah, so you've always been able to do kind of auto accompaniment stuff. Well, I say always, but you've had band in a box since I think the late 80s. So you could come up with some kind of auto accompaniment back in the day without real musicians. You had sampling, you could program drum machines, you could program synthesizers, you could have a whole band that's just one person. If you knew what you were doing, this is just speeding that stuff up. You've had... it's been algorithmically driven, but you've had software that can make use of music theory and suggest chord transitions and melodies and counterpoint and all sorts of things for years.
And how well does that work?
Some of it was brilliant.
I'm talking about now.
Now I haven't used much of that, if I'm honest. I'm lucky enough to be able to play a few instruments and lay things down and know a lot of people. So I tend to go to them. I'm quite traditional like that. It's kind of going on to another sort of subject related to this that's close to my heart, which is the experience of creating. Like for a lot of people, it's about the what message they want to get across, what emotion they want to invoke in their audience. It's not about a commercial thing. It's effectively a hobby and a joy. And for some people, that process of creating, like if it becomes a job of learning how to prompt and how to use language, like you're a computer programmer, it's very different. It's the same difference as back in the day learning to program MIDI rather than play a part in on the keyboard and record it, I think I might have gone off track there a little bit.
Possibly. I mean, well, I was going to pick you up about prompting. Yeah, because we were talking about that earlier. Yeah, and how using AI it's very powerful, but you don't necessarily get what you want out of it because
So this is what I said a moment ago about your creative intent. So back in the day, I had a different career. I used to work in government, advising ministers and so on in Downing Street. Please don't judge me for that. It was a way to make money and indulge myself at the time. One of the analogy there is that ministers used to come in with these great ideas about what they wanted to do to reshape the country, really enthusiastic. They'd then go to the civil service and say, tell me how to do that. Tell me how to make this happen. And we'd come up with some options. They'd say, here you go, Minister, 1, 2, 3, you can do these things. Can't quite do what you wanted because this law gets in the way, that gets in the way. And the point being that the minister, who's the creator in this analogy, got really frustrated because what was coming back was good, but it wasn't what they wanted. It wasn't what they intended. And I find that at the present point in time, it might change, that with large language models, it takes a lot of work to actually phrase things exactly how you want to get a result that's close to what you want, what you intended. And I don't think at the moment that anything coming back, whenever I've tried it, certainly, is precisely what I'd conceived. It might be good, I might judge it, but then I'm becoming a curator and not a creator. Yeah. And there's potential for frustration there. You might find things by accident. Happy accidents have always been a part of music. Absolutely. But is it the technology that you can rely on to make your creative vision real? I don't know yet.
Tony?
I think the key is to be critical about it and not to accept it, as gospel. I mean, we had this in the early days with Wikipedia, that everybody, thought that it was absolutely, it was right. Whatever you looked at was right. But you have to treat it with a little bit of skepticism. I think the same thing with AI models. And in my side of the business, where I'm talking about synchronization rights and rights generally in the music business, if you look at AI, it sometimes gets things wildly wrong. I mean, on the way up today, I sort of keyed in a question about who owns a particular track for publishing to see who the rights live with. And it was completely off the mark. It had no idea really. It was directing me here and there, which I know from my experience is wrong. So I think we have to look at this very critically and not accept everything.
And of course, there are many AIs, aren't there? I mean, I don't know which one you were using, but some are better.
Some are better. I mean, I think Claude isn't bad. ChatGPT, I don't know. You probably use different ones.
Yeah, so there's lots of them out there. I'm sure that everyone in the audience is familiar with different ones. Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, etc. These large language models that are, taking over from search engines now. It's not just that they don't get it right. Sometimes they just create just spurious information. I work for a magazine. We evaluate audio production equipment. We also spread the news of the launch of that equipment. And if you go onto Gemini and search for our review of something, it'll tell you what we thought of it, what the pros and cons were before we've even published a review, which is clearly wrong. It's just making it up. So, you have to, like you say, be very, very critical about the results. But I don't think it's quite the same with music because, judging music that you have created using AI, if you want to call it creation, there's a debate there. But the point for me is that most of these tools at the moment, it's quite hard to have an iterative production process. So, it used to be that you'd
to have
an iterative production process. So like the traditional model is, you're an artist, you lay down some tracks, an engineer helps you, you have a mix engineer and a producer, you go to the mastering engineer, there might be some toing and froing, someone might say, no, that's not quite right, could we just lift that in the chorus, make the guitar a bit fatter, whatever. With AI at the moment, and it could change, again, it's evolving rapidly, in my experience at the moment, it creates something, and if you want to just finesse some aspects of it, it can't. It does it all over again, and it might change something else in the process. So that idea of just refining and polishing and getting something precisely as you want it is a bit of a hurdle for AI to cross at the moment, I think.
You mentioned when you talk about iterative, what was your phrase? Iterative production?
That was a phrase I just made up, but yeah.
That's what it was.
Just using words.
So there are lots of different roles involved in a lot of these creative endeavors. And I'm just thinking about our students. Is the way forward to be more adaptable and be able to cover more of those roles? And does AI help with that? Maybe I should ask. I don't know. What happens with your writers, Tony? Are they all writing and producing and mixing and?
No, not necessarily. They're using any tools that they can get hold of to make their production better. And if they feel they're falling short in one area, then they'll use software. I mean, we've all used software for generations now, so that's nothing new. What is software if it isn't some kind of artificial aid to help you get along? And it's the same thing with a lot of different disciplines in the commercial world generally. I don't think they've got any problem with that. Question is whether you're depriving someone of their livelihood by using AI. I think that's one of the key questions here. Are you actually diminishing someone else's income streams by pulling out?
Yeah, and there's a really interesting point, because on the one hand, it's no different from any other technology in that, we've had tools that have replaced people, a drum machine replaced a drummer or whatever for years, sample libraries and orchestras and all sorts of stuff, I come back to this question of quantity and speed. So, generative AI can be really fast and really prolific, and you can drown out, the other stuff. So you can remove all of the roles. You don't have an industry left if you're.
I think
sorry. I think we're our time is on. I think we need to try and get some questions from the audience. And there's one over there.
Thanks so much for that talk. That was really interesting to hear these perspectives, and I'm sure everyone in this room, have a lot of kind of complex thoughts on the matter. I'm not sure I have so much a question. I want to maybe say something that you can respond to. I just want to push back ever so slightly on something that Matt said, where you said, I'm not sure that necessarily the consumers are that bothered about how the music is produced. I mean, if we look back to Milli Vanilli or... I'm even thinking like there was an episode of The Simpsons where Marge finds out that the monkeys didn't write their own songs and it ruins her childhood. We've always, and this event is so close in line with like Cambridge Folk Festival, and of course folk music has a kind of very romantic idea of authenticity as well. I'm one of the music lecturers here, and I talk to my students all the time about this exact topic. And I'm wondering whether there's some kind of disparity in age and demographics about how they relate to these tools that we're talking about, because when I talk to my students, really the general kind of consensus of my students, actually they take an incredibly dim view of these tools and the people that use them, and often kind of see it as a moral failing that they've entered the creative industries, whereas colleagues of mine or friends of mine in the industry who are maybe my age and a bit older actually have a much more open view to these tools as something that can assist their workflows. So I'm wondering if that's something you've also noticed, or whether you have any knowledge of how different demographics and generations are responding.
So it's not something I've researched, but I've got views on it, if that helps. When I was talking about that, I think what I had in mind was the commercial side of being an artist. So commercially, is there going to be a big enough audience that is going to accept AI created material that something commercial can be done with it? And I think the answer is yes. And I think Pandora's opened a box and it's not going back in there. But this is where we hit on, the other questions around, we've talked about live sound and maybe sort of intimate venues and audience connections. I think it's the same with, my daughter's 14. She goes to a vinyl night. She's getting really into music, the ceremony of putting on music and playing it and sharing it with people. There's an awful lot of that. I play folk guitar, finger picking stuff myself. I totally get that. I don't think the audience is one monolithic thing. I think there's always going to be niches. And if there is a bright spot here, we're in an age where the market is global. So all of the little niches are big enough to sustain a business model. So there's always going to be a market for good quality content. Maybe there's a pushback against AI, and the same as vinyl has seen a resurgence. There's a big industry around vinyl now, but it isn't the vinyl industry that was there in the 1980s. It's dwarfed by that, but there'll be enough niches to sustain careers in the creative arts, certainly, is my view.
I just wanted to make the point that often people using the tools of AI are up against deadlines. And of course, AI does speed things up, so it's very powerful in that respect. Because you've got to, if you've got to deliver quickly, then that may be a reason why people aren't.
So there's a relationship between the different creative industries here as well. So, not to be, I don't want to sound like a doomsayer all the time, but the business model in much of the music industry has been broken for a long time. Yeah. And for a while, it was like, oh, well, maybe we could be making music to sing with films like you guys do. Maybe we could be writing music for games, because these are industries that are buoyant still, or were buoyant at the time. And bit by bit, each of those things has its budgets pressured. It starts to automate an awful lot of the processes. AI is going to make inroads there as well. And that doesn't filter down to the music industry. So there's some real questions about that. And, is it that tomorrow's musician and creator is going to be more live oriented, or trying to identify some hip little market on vinyl or whatever? I don't know. But these are the issues you need to think about, is how you make that connection with that little niche in the global audience that can sustain a career.
I can add one point to that, if I may. I think a lot of the industry, the music industry, and its intersection with the media industry, which is what we do, is driven by relationships. And I don't think you can manufacture that. And I think that's to have a positive spin on it. I think that's still really important. We get our business through personal relationships, through knowing people and talking to them. And I think that will still continue, AI or no AI.
Yeah. There's nothing. Yeah, sitting alone in front of your computer with your AI is actually not a lot of fun.
But sorry again, doomsaying. We're assuming that we're talking about musicians making music, composers writing music. Maybe we're not. Maybe we're talking about big businesses trying to push a commodity onto an audience, or to use music for a different purpose, maybe for political messaging or whatever. That could be a risk of drowning out. And again, it just comes back to identify your audience, figure out who it is, what it is they like about music, how you can cater for that audience. I think, whether it's commercial or just trying to get people into your music.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any more questions? Oh, hang on.
Yeah, so with the way these AIs are trained, they're often on stolen work from other people. Is there any way that I can protect my work, my music, from getting stolen to train these models?
Protecting your work has always been an issue for creators, and I think that hasn't changed. I mean, you still need to lay down your tracks on a cloud system or a cloud-based system if that's the way that you work, or have a digital copy of it somewhere. If someone is going to infringe your rights by taking a piece of that, then that hasn't changed. I mean, those procedures still exist. Is that what you were getting at? Have I understood correctly?
If I may, I think there's a technological angle to this as well. So companies get in touch with us all the time, asking if we'll review their products or new software. And there's quite a lot recently of companies claiming to find ways to either watermark music or to fool the AI learning so that it comes up with the wrong information and so on. I haven't tested those. I don't know about them. I don't know how effective they are, how effective they'll remain. But people are trying to do that. And certainly the fact that Deezer and Apple Music and all these people can give us statistics that they feel quite confident about the quantity of AI suggests it can be recognized. So that's coming. But in the meantime, it's just like with any patent or anything like that, we need a system where we can log the fact that we were first. And then there's a question probably for governments, I think, about how to, so in a different line, my dad designs some things and there's a lot of patent questions involved in that. It's very expensive to take someone to court, even if you're in the right. And people with deep pockets can just write it out, So some kind of system, some kind of mechanism where where there's an easy way to get things taken down, get recompense, get compensation, whatever. I think that'd be really good.
That's where the legislation has to catch up, and it's urgent.
But it has to be international. That's the problem.
Okay, I think we've got to wrap it up now. So, one more question.
So, that was loud. As like a musician, right now it's very focused on online content to build an audience. Do you think AI could lead to musicians being pushed to an offline, old school style of potentially having to promote through gigs and having that human interaction, as AI will be able to massively overproduce content and take over the online scene?
Well, I think we've already alluded to the fact we think live performance is important and is a way of kind of pushing back on AI jumping in on the bandwagon. Whether that will be enough, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the content creator model that you're talking about, where music is just, your commodity and your job is being a content creator, it feels to me like it's been getting a bit tired, and there's a lot of myths about how successful it can be without some real serious backing behind you. So I don't know how real that approach actually is if you're looking for success, as it were. I think, yeah, you need to do things in different ways, but I don't see that you can retreat from social media today. I think the global reach of it is important to you. If you're doing recorded music, if you're planning tours, whatever, you're going to need to, do that. You might be people who are going to start looking to AI to create the videos for your music and put some videographers out of a job just to make your music more successful. I don't know. But yeah, something to consider. That model might not last forever.
Okay, well, any more questions? I think we've got to wrap it up anyway. So thanks very much for listening, and thank you to Tony Orchudesch and Matt Houghton.
Yeah, thank you.
And obviously, a debate that's going to run and run. Thanks.